Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so good to be here virtually with all of you today. I'm Lisa Lewis, Head of Research and Learning at Bell Library. And on behalf of the library, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today to celebrate our Spring 2021 Outstanding Faculty Speaker, Dr. Ellen Denham. The Outstanding Faculty Speaker Series is co-hosted by the library and the Center for Faculty Excellence. The selection process is competitive, and our speakers are chosen by the members of the Center for Faculty Excellence Committee. In fall semesters, we celebrate faculty participating in research and scholarship. And in spring semesters, we focus on faculty who are outstanding for their creative endeavors. Through this program, we highlight the work of our faculty and share scholarship across the Island University. And now please welcome Dr. Mark Hartlaub, Dean of the College of Liberal Arts, who will introduce today's speaker.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Yes, so it's my privilege to welcome Dr. Ellen Denham. She joined our faculty in the fall of 2017 as a professional assistant professor of music, teaching applied voice and directing our opera workshop program. She graduated with her doctorate from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign in 2016, and also previously studied at the New England Conservatory of Music. Before joining our faculty, she taught voice at several other institutions and had a professional career as a singer. During the pandemic, which obviously is a difficult time for all, she facilitated a production co-created with her students called Adulting in Pandemic Land. She worked with students to create their own improvised original sung monologues that were recorded through Zoom and were edited together into a filmed production that was streamed on YouTube. Currently, she's directing a children's opera that she wrote with her colleague, Professor Ross Bernhard, called Olivia's Ocean. This piece was commissioned by the Hart Research Institute. Dr. Denham and Dr. Bernhard also are working with two of our media production professors, Daewon Kim and Scott Thurman, along with HRI, to premiere this film in 2021. If ever there's a faculty member who thinks outside the box, it's Ellen Denham. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Ellen Denham.
Thanks very much to Mark and to Lisa, to Emma, to the library and the Center for Faculty Excellence. I'm really honored to be able to talk to you today, and I'm excited to be able to talk to you about some things that are very near and dear to my heart. Now, I am going to be sharing some PowerPoint slides and some music, so maybe if you all can just let me know in the chat if some sound doesn't work or something doesn't function, let me know about it. And let's see, I'll just go share here. Okay, so I'm going to talk some about creating opera in a pandemic, some of the challenges and some of the silver linings. So if a singer is performing in a forest and no one is there to listen, is it still opera? Or more to the point, in the middle of a pandemic, when we can't reach our audiences in the usual way, can we still reach them? And can our institutions and performers still have the experience of presenting their work? The short answer is yes. The long answer, I'm going to get into some of that. So you're no doubt aware of how the pandemic has affected the performing arts. Theaters and concert halls closed, singing together proven to be particularly risky, and various events either postponed, canceled, or moved to virtual platforms. You may not be aware of some of the creative solutions that have been developed and used to allow us to still create and enjoy the performing arts. And some of these solutions can even be carried forward into post-pandemic life. So you will appreciate the art more when you see some of those silver linings. So today I'm going to talk to you about how the pandemic has affected TAMU-CC Opera specifically and other institutions. For instance, our spring 2020 production was completely canceled. In fall, we had a virtual project, and then we're right in the middle of post-production of our film project. And Other institutions have also put into place solutions to still allow students to develop their performance skills and bring those before an audience. So I'm going to describe some of the brainstorming that took place the early pandemic. Was tons of brainstorming and strategizing. What do we do now? Then in the fall, we had that project that Dr. Hartlaub mentioned, Adulting in Pandemic Land, virtual, almost completely virtual classes and rehearsals, and then the spring masked and distanced rehearsals for Olivia's Ocean. So first, some background on all the brainstorming and strategizing. It was a challenging time, but it was also a time of a lot of really good and interesting ideas, the way that different organizations brainstormed and responded to this. But first of all, why opera? And here's a picture of me in one of my very first opera roles. Why do I love opera so much? What I love is it's a combination of so many wonderful things. We have music, drama, dance, scenic elements, and shared energy between performers and their audience. And there's nothing like being on stage or backstage or in the audience with a full orchestra, full cast of singers, lights, costumes, scenery, stagehands, and everyone that it takes to put on a production, everybody working together in close physical proximity. A creative collaboration is like food for me. I need it literally to survive. And being inspired by and working with other smart and creative people, including my own students, is just what absolutely makes life worthwhile to me. And I know a lot of other performing artists are like that. So when you are limited in being able to do that, it really does become a challenge. So a lot of things changed in pandemic where it's not safe to congregate and sing together. So looking back at fall 2020, Carmenella became canceled, Ella, unfortunately. By the end of spring break, it was clear that we were virtual only for the rest of the semester. So we canceled the opera, and the production was actually pretty close to performance ready. Now, this comic children's opera uses music from the famous opera Carmen by Bizet, but it's a clever reimagining of the Cinderella story by Denise Page Carraher. Spoiler alert, unlike in Carmen, nobody dies at the end of this. So here's the only footage. I have a link to a little rehearsal video, which is just us doing a dance step. It's literally the only thing that survives of that. So look, no masks, so we're so close together. Down, down, up, down, down, up, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So anyway, that was just before the pandemic, and I thought we'll just have my student assistant film that so they can practice those dance steps over spring break. And then you know what happened next. So you've all lived through the past year too, so I don't need to tell you how disappointing that was to have to cancel something we'd worked so hard on. And not only that, but we kept getting this new ominous news about the dangers of singing together. So how could we recreate at least some of the experiences of making music together? Well, fortunately, nobody had to consider this question alone. The performing arts and music communities really came together to help each other develop strategies and solutions. We had things like virtual choir and opera projects, where people would be filmed and recorded individually and then mixed. We had smaller ensembles, distanced and or masked. Also projects over video conferencing platforms in real time, things like Zoom or WebEx. Now this can be tricky because of music, because of latency. And the best way to explain that is if I was conducting and snapping and keeping a beat and you all were trying to go on my beat, you would not be with me because everyone would have their own individual delay. Now there are software and platforms and equipment to counteract and defeat this latency so people in small groups can actually perform together distanced in real time over the internet. There's something called SoundJack, for instance. That requires a certain level of technology. Everyone's got to be Ethernet connected, learning curve. At any rate, it's out there, but it's not something that everybody has access to right now. Whoops, I went backwards. So there are different types of adaptations. one of the first things that really just made me feel hopeful for the future was on Good Friday of 2020, on April 10th, broadcast live from the St. Thomas Church in Leipzig, Germany. This is where Johann Sebastian Bach spent so much of his life and lived and worked and composed. They performed the Bach St. John Passion, which is usually performed for a large chorus. You have a Baroque orchestra, you have soloists. They could not put in the church that many people, and they could not have a live audience, but they arranged it. The three performers arranged it mostly for a trio of tenor, a keyboard player playing harpsichord and organ, and percussion. And it was just absolutely stunning. Was it like what Bach would have envisioned or heard during his lifetime? Of course not, but what a beautiful adaptation. So let's look at just a brief glimpse of what that looked and sounded like.
Es ist unsere Geschichte. Wir machen alle zusammen diese Passion.
So it was an absolutely gorgeous interpretation and a great example of how to adapt. If you can't do exactly what you set out to do, what can you still do and how can you adapt? And I just absolutely loved that. They actually put on the St. John Passion again this year, and they had a bigger group. They were still distanced, but they were able to put on a little bigger group this year. Now, another type of adaptation is to have individual performances that are then compiled together. And one thing I came across early in the pandemic was something called Sofa Shakespeare, which is the brainchild of Julia Jolzetti, who is a self-described, very tired actor, teaching artist, and mom in self-isolation since March 14th, 2020. So what she did was took entire Shakespeare plays, divide them up into approximately 1-minute excerpts, ask for volunteers to email her, and then she would assign you a little 1-minute chunk of that Shakespeare play. You were responsible for filming that in whatever way you saw fit. You could play all the characters, recruit family members, use your Barbie dolls, whatever. There weren't really any rules, and there were a lot of actors that had nowhere to perform and wanted something to do. So I took part in that. I performed in 2 of these productions, but what I'm going to show you is actually not myself performing, but one of my favorite excerpts from Midsummer Night's Dream, where the Newton family in Birmingham, Alabama, involved their children playing a little bit of Oberon and Titania from Midsummer Night's Dream. It's super cute.
Titania, music call, and strike more dead than common sleep of all these 5 senses. Music home, music such as chum sleep. Now and thou wakest with thy own fool's eyes peep.
So this was really great. How creative that they used the kids and taught them the Shakespeare and filmed outside in some really beautiful locations. My first one, I filmed it and I had to think about, oh, how do I film myself? I mean, I was playing Oberon outdoors at night, and I said, oh, I'll do it in my yard, and I'll put a light here and I'll put a light there, and I'll do all this stuff. And mine wasn't bad, but theirs is way better. But then by the second time, I had watched enough of this, and I thought I was playing 3 different male characters in Much Ado About Nothing. So I filmed myself sitting in different places, and I drew on 3 different kind of beards, and got a little bit more creative with the video editing, which actually was a good thing, because then that I did actually use that later on in Adulting in Pandemic Land, since we did that type of project. So also a lot of organizations gave us so much assistance with this. Organizations that many performing artists already belong to, they helped lead the way. Suddenly there were free webinars and virtual workshops, groups of opera professionals sharing their plans and ideas and expertise on what to do. There was a Facebook group called Opera Directing in a COVID-19 World, where people would chime in and exchange ideas. And an organization, Balancing the Stage, that I belong to for opera stage directors, that they would have weekly director Zoom happy hours, and I'd be sitting there chatting with some really great opera directors and getting to pick their brains. So that was really wonderful. So all these, I'm going to talk a little more about Fifth House Ensemble. American Lyric Theater puts on a librettist and composer development program, which usually it's a very select program that you have to live in or New York City. They had free webinars on how to outline an opera. So National Opera Association had a wonderful virtual conference and also some free webinars on doing opera in a pandemic. Now I'm going to talk a little more about this chamber ensemble, Fifth House Ensemble, a wonderful chamber ensemble of instrumentalists based in Chicago. Now, I first met them several years ago at a conference, and they do a lot of art for social awareness. They do some really interesting projects, a lot of educational outreach, supporting new composers, wonderful, wonderful work. But in the start of the pandemic, they started doing this daily deep listening live stream on Facebook. So every day, and they're actually still doing it, every weekday at 10 o'clock Central Time, there's a half hour of these deep listening exercises over Zoom. Now, what's deep listening? I could give a whole presentation on that, so I'll try to give you the short answer. It's the brainchild of composer and improviser Pauline Oliveros. We all need to be better listeners, especially musicians. So it's exercises designed to do movement, to do sound, and to do listening together in a group, which is usually in person. Works very well over Zoom. And, you know, despite the latency, we were actually able to perform some improvisations together. Now, are we going to create great art that way? Probably not. But this kind of scratched that itch of, I want to perform with other people. So I'm going to share with you an excerpt of, this is a text score that I created called Sound Quilt, which a text score is, instead of like music notated out with G sharp and F and so forth, it's just a series of instructions, and you're basically improvising, but you're using these written instructions, like you're going to play long tones here. And here we are improvising together on Zoom with no post-production, no editing. This is just, you know, filmed live over Zoom. Along the bottom of the screen are some instructions. We put those in the chat on Zoom, so they all knew, they were all reading from a series of instructions that I'd written. So what everyone's hearing is a little bit different from the next person. So what seems kind of like it's got a beat between the two, the cellist might hear something slightly different out of her speaking. So we don't worry about the fact that may not be in sync. It's just listen to each other and go with what you hear and create something.
don't stop.
That is the appropriate reaction. Yeah, so musicians playing around together. I mean, I did this almost every weekday over the entire summer because, I mean, that's what we missed, right? Is getting to make music together. So even if it wasn't making music traditionally, I found we were able to have still a lot of that experience. And the end result maybe isn't something you'd want to listen to all day long, but considering the limitations what we were working with, I felt like that was pretty cool to be able to still do that. And I did a lot of that with my students also when we came back in the fall. And I mentioned before the social media networking. Thank goodness for Facebook groups. I joined groups about opera directors, pandemic pedagogy, regional group, a very nice group of South Texas collegiate opera directors exchanging information, helping each other out. And some of these groups also have things like Zoom happy hours and group discussions where we get on, hey, what is your plan for fall semester? And exchange ideas back and forth. And it was also possible by late summer and fall to start viewing other people's projects that were available online, to either buy a ticket and watch online or things that were just available for free on YouTube. So our own Department of Theater and Dance did some really outstanding virtual productions in the fall. I got to see The Book of Will, Marie Antoinette, and then the Breaker Bunch improv show, which was literally filmed over Zoom in real time. So that was really great. And some other opera productions. This is just a partial list of a few that stood out to me. But Northwestern University Opera Theater, before the pandemic, had been planning to do Monteverdi's opera Orfeo. Well, then the pandemic hit and they all had to go home. And director Joachim Schomburger, he directed me in several operas with Indianapolis Opera, and he's really good at technology. He does all kind of projections and wonderful things when he directs. So they gave the students, they had recording equipment. They all recorded themselves individually, singers and instrumentalists, and that was all mixed. They all filmed themselves separately, just with their friends, with a phone, whatever technology they had available, and it turned into a really wonderful production. So here's the trailer for that. So all those musicians you see there were recorded individually and then mixed. So sound quality is great. Unfortunately, they didn't have the opportunity to do this all together in one room, but the end result was really great. And they re-envisioned the story of Orpheus and Eurydice as kind of like this hippie wedding in the 1960s. And it's a pretty brilliant production. Something else that I got to see during the summer is Zoom Speed Dating Tonight. Composer Michael Ching, and he's a great guy. He's a friend of mine. Has this opera called Speed Dating Tonight, which is, well, what it sounds like. Different people meet and they sing little introductions, little songs, what they're looking for in somebody they want to date. There's some really strange characters who show up that maybe you wouldn't want to date. And they did, the Brevard Music Center did a Zoom version of that. Now, again, they had all the singers had a click track to listen to, and they all recorded things individually, and then that was mixed. But we'll look at just a glimpse of what that looked like.
Okay. Stand by, everybody. Yeah, Caroline just got here. Okay. Stand by. Well, here we go.
Speed dating tonight, speed dating tonight.
I'm going to go ahead and pause that there. It's a really good production. And I do have most of this stuff in a YouTube playlist that if anybody wants, I can send you. There's some really beautiful music, some interesting characters, and pretty much they put two of them in a breakout room and they all sing their little piece back and forth. And there's some drama and some broken hearts and some people that are a little scary that you do not want to go on a date with that person ever again. But really wonderful production. And again, they filmed out those all individually and then combined it. Now here's something different. The Shepherd School of Music at Rice University in the fall did a beautiful production of Der Kaiser von Atlantis, which has a small cast and a small group of instrumentalists. They used green screen and they did things like film the singers lip syncing and did the music ahead of time to have less, spit flying in the air and stuff that was dangerous. Now, I'd love to do something like this, but I got to tell you, they are one of the top music schools in our state, and they've got a lot more budget than we do. But it's a gorgeous production.
The biggest mistake women can make when it comes to reducing wrinkles is not really understanding where they come from.
Okay, here we go.
I wanted to make sure that I was able to offer something to the students that would benefit them, that they found meaning in, that was relevant on some sort of social level and also a musical level. And also thinking about, how are we going to move forward into the fall semester, knowing that there's a real great likelihood that we're not going to be able to perform together. And so in my mind, I thought, well, what chamber operas exist? I thought Der Kaiser is a fantastic piece to put on for the students. It's a small cast. It only has 7 singers, and there's an orchestra of 15 people. And I knew moving into the building that we would have the capacity and the space to be able to socially distance everybody.
So I'm going to pause that there. So they did a lot of great effects on that green screen. It was a really beautiful production, and that's also still available to watch. And there's subtitles. A great example of how to actually have people distance safely and still perform together. So I'm going to now discuss some specifics about what we did here in fall of 2020 with our virtual classes and virtual production. So we put on a completely virtual film production, Adulting in Pandemic Land. So I employed this technique that I call strategic procrastination. It sounds kind of funny, like you're making an excuse, but I believe in this because I think that over planning can stifle creativity and leave no wiggle room for serendipity. Wanted to avoid preconceived notions of what the end product was going to look like. See what the students bring and what they most need to learn. They were kind of hurting without not being able to gather too. So I thought, let's let them direct what we want to do with this here and design some flexible class activities that can take place mostly via WebEx. Also I want to use the lessons I learned from things like doing that deep listening every day on Zoom and all the other virtual workshops and interactions that I had been a part of. Also, unlike places like Rice University, I wanted to keep it simple and just use what technology we already had available. So let's not worry about making something with crystal clear, beautiful sound for posterity. Let's play around. If you're on your phone, we'll record on your phone. We'll use what we've got available. So some of our activities, I want to read you a description that I wrote of this class that I emailed to the students in summer 2020. I said, the performing ensemble I direct is called Opera Workshop, and this semester we're using the term opera in its broadest sense to mean any storytelling combined with music. What will this look like? Your guess is as good as mine, because that depends on who signs up and what you bring. We will storyboard ideas together. You will create music through composition and improvisation, using any musical influences and genres you choose. I will be your guide, but you will create the content. Now, some of these activities included theater improv games on WebEx, and then we gradually incorporated some singing improv, taking into account the latency and how you have to adjust for that. We watched and discussed that opera, Zoom speed dating tonight. We did a lot of group movement warm-up and movement improvisation exercises. And we set some parameters for how can we improvise together despite the latency, what kind of rules and techniques work. We started storyboarding ideas for performance. We learned how to mark up and how to deliver a theatrical monologue. And then we turned those monologues into an improvised song with a backing track. So we wanted to present some of that work. Oops, let me back up. So in designing our production, we storyboarded specifically some ideas and situations about pandemic life. What are they facing right now? And students developed their own characters facing life in 2020. They wrote an original monologue as this character. They also sang a piece from their classical or musical theater repertoire as the character. And then they turned their original monologues into improvised singing with backing tracks that were either created by our pianist, Dr. Sangmi Lim, or by an app that generated some little kind of looping backing tracks. And we also used some themed improvisations that we recorded during class time. I just hit record on Zoom, and whatever came out, that's what it was. We didn't do any sound editing, post-production, kind of warts and all, but we had lots of fun with that. So Adulting in Pandemic Land, we chose that title because when I asked them, what are some of the issues you're facing right now? Some of them said, we're still learning how to be an adult and like do normal adult things. And here we are in a pandemic. And so it became Adulting in Pandemic Land. And I do have a very short little documentary here that this was accepted into a virtual showcase of members' responses to the pandemic at the National Opera Association National Conference in January. So here's a little 2-minute summary of Adulting in Pandemic Land. To sing or collaborate over Zoom or other platforms, it's just like a different set of stuff to adapt to. Adulting is hard, 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 adulting is hard in a pandemic.
Broadway's closed till next year. Why did I book that ticket here? It's so obvious. The government sometimes burns, and maybe the occasional lizard person.
But what was I supposed to expect from a lowlife like you?
Why is that so much fun?
So, you know, I went into that thinking, I have no idea what we can do. I have no idea whether they'll learn anything, trying to do opera class virtually, but turned out to be a really great experience. And the fact that we were able to just make eye contact and work and improvise together, it still felt like part of a community. It didn't necessarily feel like we were as distant from each other as we actually were. So moving on to late fall 2020, we had some idea of what was working for other institutions and how to bring forward our plans for Olivia's Ocean, which last week we completed filming this world premiere children's opera sponsored by the Heart Research Institute. We used distance masked rehearsals with a small cast, and the final product is a film instead of a public live performance. And there is Scott Thurman with the camera at one of our filming sessions in the photo. So to provide some background, we need to go all the way back to fall 2019 before anyone knew a pandemic was on the horizon. So we had this initial mixer, and our dean encouraged faculty members to attend a mixer between the College of Liberal Arts and the Hart Research Institute. So that was a really great initiative, because at this event, we were able to have introductions between faculty members from Hart and from the College of Liberal Arts and discuss possible collaboration. And one thing I talked about with several of the people I met was using artistic means to draw attention to science-driven solutions. Are there things that we need as human beings to know about that scientists can tell us, but maybe we can learn these things through art? And we joked about a possible oyster opera. One of the topics that evening was about the need for sustainable oyster farming. So I was like, okay, I'll write you an oyster opera. It didn't turn into an oyster opera. Spoiler alert, there are no oysters in Olivia's Ocean. Didn't work out that way. And then I talked to my colleague, Ross Bernhardt, about composing a score. He's a wonderful composer. And I kept in touch with Larry McKinney via email. So Ross and I sat down with Larry McKinney and also with Gail Sutton at the Hart Institute, and we proposed a basic children's opera plot on a subject of their choosing. And this is the basic kind of plot that I pitched based on having performed in a lot of children's operas. And, you know, the plot usually is something formulaic, but it's a formula that generally works pretty well. So your character has a problem, usually something external, like they need to get this special object, and something internal. For instance, they need to learn to trust others. The character tries to reach their goal, but cannot do it unless they receive some surprising help and or learn an important lesson. The character reaches the goal, probably with some twists, and solves both their external and internal issues. And usually there's a larger lesson, such as oyster farming is the answer to the challenge the characters faced at the start, and a personal lesson, such as it's important to listen to the wisdom of elders. So, and this subject was very near and dear to my heart about ocean sustainability. Prior to writing Olivia's Ocean, much of my published fiction deals with environmental themes, and one of the peak experiences of my life so far has been going snorkeling in the Galapagos Island with marine iguanas, giant sea turtles, sea lions, all kind of other animals. It was just amazing. So the subject was already pretty near and dear to my heart. So Larry and Gail at Hart suggested that one of the biggest problems with the ocean, where individuals can actually have a chance to have some impact and take action, is to reduce the amount of plastic waste that gets into the ocean. And they showed us this video narrated by 6-year-old Jack of all the cups going into the bay after the rain comes and they wash out the storm drains.
Whatever trash is on the road and it rains, it's gonna get washed into the bay.
So I'll stop that there, but that's a lot of cups, you know, an inch of rain, and then this is what happens to the bay. And that's pretty sad to see. So I thought, well, yeah, that's a great idea to do something. The theme of the opera be, let's not let trash get into the ocean. So, oh, there's actually, Olivia sings a song in the opera called Just One Cup that is inspired in part by this. So then the pandemic hit. So let's look at the timeline here. Back in fall 2019, we discussed that possible oyster opera with Larry McKinney at the event that Dr. Hartlaub had helped us put together. And then by February 2020, we had a working title and a plot outline, and Ross was on board as composer. and we start planning for an opera performance in spring 2021. Then the pandemic hits. Now we kept going, but we had no idea, whether we'd be able to keep going or what exactly this might look like at the time. So during summer, fall of 2020, we were finalizing the script and Ross was composing the music. And then by the end of the semester, we brought Daewon Kim and Scott Thurman on board, added to the team to turn this into a film. So how did we adapt? Because we were already in a pandemic when we were doing most of the composing and writing of the story, we decided to keep the number of solo singers and the number of instrumentalists smaller than we ordinarily would have done. We have 3 human characters, 3 sea creatures, and then we thought we can have optional chorus. We can add additional people who, if other people want to be in it, sign up for the class, but we could do it with as few as 6 singers. And this is scored for piano, violin, oboe, and percussion. So a small group of instrumentalists that it's not too hard to distance out. Also plans for distance staging to have not too many characters in a scene interacting at once. And in order to reach the audience, because, at the time in fall 2020, we were still in maybe stage 1 of the pandemic, as far as we could not even have outside people come to campus to events. And the Heart Research Institute has invested money in this. They commissioned the libretto, the story, and the lyrics from myself, and the music from Ross Bernhardt. We didn't want to put it on for only a few people on campus, have our world premiere, or then when we opened up, so where we can have off-campus people, but in the Performing Arts Center, there are only a few seats you can actually sit in. We can't put a full audience in there just yet. Hopefully soon. We'll just have to wait and see. So we pitched the idea to turn this into a film. I talked to David Gurney, Chair of Communication and Media, and Daewon Kim and Scott Thurman came on board with some just great ideas. And it's exciting for me because I've never been part of a film project before. So I'm learning all kinds of new things. But by now you're probably tired of hearing me talk about this and want to see a little bit about what it actually looks like. So I have some photos here that were taken by Will Whitworth during one of our filming sessions. So here we have the stage set up. There's Daewon, and there I am with some actors on stage in the back. Our pianist, Dr. Sangmi Lim, down here. And we had to get used to it. When we start, we would have Raven come out and click the little slate, and Daewon would say action, and it's like, oh, this is cool. We're in a real movie. There's our violinist, Jesus Lopez. Some of our characters, Brooke No as Olivia, and some of our characters as sea creatures filming a scene. And we've got some of our Ravens, I don't know what her title is, one of the media assistants, and then Lily, who's a percussionist, but she was serving as my production assistant, Raymond, who's our percussionist. There's our composer, Dr. Ross Bernhardt, who not only composed, was actually playing in the production as well. And Scott Thurman with the camera. And now you can see here a little bit what the whole setup looks like. There's Dr. Jose Flores, our conductor, and you can see our instrumentalists are spread way out. And our singers, it may look like they're pretty close together, but we've measured, and they have their little X to stand on, and they're more than 6 feet apart. We did have them sing without masks, which, was maybe a little scary, but we were like, please be distant from each other as much as you can. Now, the tricky thing is there are some intimate moments in this where you really want grandpa and mom to be able to hug Olivia. You really want them to be able to touch each other, and we couldn't do that. So what do we do? So I had talked to Michael Schell, who's the stage director for Indiana University Opera, about the problem of how do you display. He was directing La Bohème, which is a love story, and socially distanced. I was like, how do you do that? They can't kiss each other, they can't touch. And he said, he gave me a really great tip. He said, we have to see the person on the receiving end of the contact. We have to see them receive that, even though they're not receiving it physically. So we see them getting that energy despite the physical distance. So what I actually staged here is at the end of a trio that they sing, They all stand there and they open their arms like they're going to hug each other. And then they just close up their arms like they're all hugging each other. And they're standing in a triangle facing each other. And, you know, it worked for me. And I told them, feel that energy, imagine that you really are hugging each other. And, you know, worked for me. So we'll see how it works for audiences. But, you know, adaptations you never really thought you'd have to make. But what is an opera without music and lights and action? So Day One was nice enough to put together a short teaser for this. And he says, you know, with a disclaimer that this, no color correction, no post-production. This is just a little glimpse at what the opera is going to look like.
Someday I'll be a great inventor. You don't believe me, do you? But just wait and see all the things I'll dream up to clean up the trash in the jar.
Plastic, styrofoam, oil, and all of the other junk. It gets on our fins and gets into our tummies. And we don't like it, oh no, not one bit. Or is it saving us? Saving us. Many hands can solve the problems of our time. None of us is tasked to do it all alone. Many minds, many hands can solve the problems of our time.
So a small sneak preview there. And we are actually screening on Sunday, April 25th at 3 o'clock, a rough screening this Sunday in the Performing Arts Center, rough cut of the film with the singers and instrumentalists are going to perform live, 3 selections, I believe after the movie. I think the movie's first. And again, it won't be all in post-production and all shiny yet, but I can't wait for you all to see it. Now, there are lots of people to thank for their work on this project, but for the full list, you're going to have to wait for the film credits because I could be here probably for the next 10 minutes. But you might be curious to know what are those silver linings I referred to earlier. Nobody wants to be in a pandemic. We wish we didn't have to go through what we did, but the silver linings were increased collaboration with other people in the field despite the distance, development of new technical skills. I learned some basic video editing and virtual collaboration and performance skills, and so did a lot of other folks, including my students. Increased ability to think outside the box, and new types of collaboration with colleagues in other disciplines who knew that they get to do film. So here's a little poster for the film preview. We don't have an absolute date for the film release yet. They're in post-production and there's a lot of work that goes on there that I'm glad I don't have to understand anything about because it's way over my head. But I'm going to stop sharing my screen here because I did want to leave time if there are any questions.
First thing is not a question. It's just, this is the coolest thing ever. I love it. I love it.
Thanks.
I'm wondering about your students. Have they shared with you, you know, sort of their observations or their thoughts about, you know, this process? Was it what they expected? I know you said they brought a lot of their own their needs and their interests to what you worked on in the fall and also maybe into this spring, but you know, how did they feel about how it all went?
I think they were pretty excited about how it all went, and it took a little bit of adjusting because usually our opera acting style is just big and loud and all facing front, and we had to adjust that a little bit. But I think they realized this is going to be a film, and on day one I told them this thing might still be around for your grandchildren to see. So in other words, you get your music learned, you get your stuff learned, because if you make a mistake one night in the pack and 100, 200 people see it, that's one thing. But if you're still cringing about it, it's on film for everybody, for lots of people to see for maybe a long time, which obviously nobody's perfect. Things happen that we don't want, but I think they really took that to heart and they worked very hard on this. Other questions? Thoughts?
Yeah, I have a question, Ellen. Yeah, I know that the theater department also this year, they had to make some adjustments. They had some, they live streamed some, they had films, they had, Allison Frost is working on music videos, that they're doing now. And so I could see though that music in the same way as theater, it's a different process. Yes, you still, as an audience member, I get entertained, but I think, what's missing is, and again, I'm not a performer like this, like getting energy from the crowd, but did your students find that did they get some energy missing from, live performance that they didn't really get? Even though, yes, we're filming the process, but they feel different?
Yeah, I feel like they did, but not, would have been nice. That's one reason we're having this event on Sunday, because I really wanted them to get to perform at least a little bit of it, to do something in front of the audience, because I think they did a really good job of feeding off each other's energy. But I know as a performer myself, I do better when I've got an audience out in front of me. I feel like I need that energy from the audience. So that's difficult to duplicate. I don't think there was any way we could completely duplicate that, but I'm hoping on Sunday it'll feel good for them to actually have an audience there listening. At one point I thought, well, maybe we could have a few people come during filming, and then I realized, nope, somebody makes noise, and we couldn't have that. Now I think in fall with the completely virtual production, originally we were planning to have that be partially virtual, and we were going to, in the pack, we were going to have the filmed excerpts, and then they were each going to sing one live musical number with piano on the stage. But then we had some people quarantining just for, safety's sake, and realized it was going to become entirely virtual. And then it was streamed, and it was so much fun. And then after that, I wanted to talk to all my students. It was a little bit of a letdown. It's like we had the people that watched the live stream may have enjoyed it, but we didn't really get to appreciate their enjoyment or their energy. So that felt a little bit different for sure.
I don't hear anybody else asking a question. So I was going to ask if you could talk a little bit more about deep listening, because that sounds really, really interesting to me. And I'm not familiar with it.
Cool. Yeah, I could probably talk I actually did give a presentation mostly about this with our regional National Association of Teachers singing conference in the fall. But it's basically the idea is that we all need to be better listeners, and sometimes you can, the most basic exercise is you just hum or sing a pitch, and everybody else listens, and they maybe hum or sing that pitch or a different pitch. Leave some time to listen and to watch and to take in what's around you rather than just jumping in and doing something. These exercises are meant to be collaborative, and it can be something, and not to have any preconceived notion of what the end product is going to be like, because it's about the process. So there were times when in the live stream, I led an exercise and I kind of thought I wanted to get this thing out of it. I want to make pretty sounds together, and it would turn into weird speaking, so once you put it out there, you don't know what it's going to sound like. And that's actually kind of good, because, you let go of control and listen to what other people bring. And there's a Center for Deep Listening at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, which houses the collection of Pauline Oliveros' papers, who's the one who came up with this. She's done TED Talks about it. So actually, if you look up Pauline Oliveros TED Talk on deep listening, that's probably the best place to get a good introduction. She passed away just a few years ago in her 80s, and just a phenomenal performer and musician who I think doesn't get as much credit as she probably deserved.
Cool, thanks.
So you're in post-production. What's the next big thing?
They are doing video editing, sound editing, color correction, all kinds of stuff. And I'm aware that this is going on, but I'm not personally involved in that since it's not my area. And then we have a final product. We don't know exactly yet what platform that is going to go out on, because Hart is working on that and deciding, looking at what's the best way to get this out to the most number of people, but also to have some way to track it, not just throw it up on YouTube and walk away, and then we have no idea if how to market it, promote it, and get it out there. So they've got a marketing team that's working on that.
Are there any more questions? Okay, well, if not, thank you, Dr. Ellen. This was amazing, and it was wonderful to hear about all of the different ways that people are connecting and sharing and creating together. And we're just so happy to have you presenting for us.
Well, thanks so much. It was a big honor.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And I have a lot of YouTube videos I plan on going and watching now. That was great.
Yes.
So enjoyable.